as soon as the drone story happened, this goes back, maybe we'll talk about it. Let's see what happens. The whole story of the War of the Worlds broadcast of 1938, okay, with what was called the Mercury Theater and Orson Welles. So they recreated H.G. Wells' book of the War of the Worlds, which came out in the late 1890s, which was in England. And so, I mean, that was staged in England. H.G. Wells, The Invisible Man, The Time Machine, right? War of the Worlds. Well, a young Orson Welles, who went on to fame, you know, with Citizen Kane and all these great movies, was only like 23. And on a Sunday night, the night before Halloween in 1938, they had a radio broadcast in New Jersey where they made this whole dialogue about like Martians coming. And they
In
kept
New
on.
Jersey.
What's that?
In New Jersey?
Yeah, in New Jersey, at a fictional town called Grover's Mills. And what happened was that he was brought before the Congress.
Do you want to protect yourself from potentially harmful EMF radiation? If you do, check out tinfoilcap.co. We have EMF protection from head to toe, literally. So whether you want to purchase a hat, or you want to purchase a Faraday cage for your phone, or you want to purchase an EMF blocker for your driver's license and credit cards, this is called a snood. This will go around your entire head. You can actually wear it kind of like a beanie, but it'll go over your neck and it'll leave your eyes open if you want it to. You can pull it down below your nose or below your mouth. So these are called EMF snoods. They're all on sale right now. We are the original. The testimonies are amazing. I just talked to somebody the other day that sleeps every night with one of these liners. This is a liner that you can actually take out of the hat. This has two different types of fabrics. So not only will it block the lower frequencies, but the higher frequencies, like 5G as an example. All hats include a liner. So every hat you purchase includes a liner. Everything's on sale at tinfoilcap.co. We've tested all of our products also with technologies that will monitor the amount of EMF frequencies and the type of EMF frequencies. And we can absolutely verify that the EMF liners will block radiation. Read the testimonials, get yours, get the discount. Go to tinfoilcap.co for EMF protection from head to toe. All right, let's get back to the presentation right now.
In fact, I went to a bookstore about 20 years ago, and there's a whole thing that you can order if you go to Amazon. This was gigantic. And guess what? It was called, his group was called the Mercury Theater. It's talking about using a planet. And they were on radio. This is the heyday of radio. We're talking 1930s. There's no TV. TV doesn't happen until the late 1940s. So all those radio shows were happening. I mean, now we look at them nostalgically. You see the picture of the old radios, and people were listening to radio. World War II, the things that were happening, in Europe. All these people who then went on TV, like Walter Cronkite and some of these other people, all were part of these radio broadcasts, coming from Europe, like what's happening, the Allies, D-Day and all these other things. And you'd hear people, you had the newspaper, you had radio. That's what you had, radio and newspapers. And so Orson Welles, and I mean, this is almost unimaginable. You just mentioned before 1977. I'm a lot older. You had a 23-year-old guy who eventually, in 1941, creates Citizen Kane. That's only 3 years later. He becomes like the most famous person in the world, because what happened was people didn't hear on the radio, which was like every 20 minutes or so, this is a broadcast. This is not really happening. You see, so what happens is suddenly people would turn on the radio, they're turning their dial. And the Martians with their rays, and they're burning people alive, whatever it was. And they have these great voices. And then they would say, and people started getting their guns and like running out there and like being terrified. So that was in New Jersey. And when this stuff happened in New Jersey, it started in New Jersey with the drones. Immediately I thought about what happened, and people can go back. And it was the night before Halloween. This is an exact thing. And in astrology, that was sort of the symbolism of the fact that that was before World War I started by 1 year, by like 11 months. World War II started September of 1939, invasion of Poland by Germany. But the year before, this theatrical thing happened. And so this is how I've studied a lot of astrology in the world. For instance, one other thing, let me mention this in closing. And this is true. a movie just came out on December 20th. It's called Homestead, in theaters. I won't give all the details, but it's about an event in Los Angeles. This is a true, I'm not making this up. This is January 10th. On December 20th, a movie called Homestead came out. But apparently, the movie is really the beginning of a show. Now, this happened before, many times before. When 3 Mile Island happened, okay, in 1979, at the end of March, a movie came out. This is real, folks, called The China Syndrome, okay? Michael Douglas, Jane Fonda, Jack Lemmon, of a nuclear problem in Los Angeles, in California. Meanwhile, as it's playing in the movie theater in Pennsylvania, we have a real 3 Mile Island thing. Remember Chernobyl, Fukushima, which are the two worst ever. 3 Mile Island was one of these meltdown kind of things where, okay. Well, while everybody's going to movies, seeing this amazing movie, which was a great movie, The China Syndrome with 3 amazing stars, this thing happens in Pennsylvania. Why? In many ways, it's because it's like, what are movies? They're like our dreams and our nightmares, Nosferatu is out there, with Willem Dafoe at the same time, the classic Dracula thing is coming out. Well, look what just happened again in Los Angeles and around the country with these storms. I relate them particularly to Chiron, also Pluto going into Aquarius, Chiron retrograding back to the total solar eclipse from last year, which happened through Central America, Mexico, and the United States. So I'm working with astrology. I'm looking at, say, the Los Angeles charts are totally valid. I mean, the alignments that other astrologers are seeing, if they were on your show, you had 50 Mark learners or 100 Mark learners or people, men and women out there, and we had the Axis charts. None of them are going to be saying, oh, there's no correlation. It's just like whatever they're showing is not true. It's in the charts. It's just that there are challenging things like these cards that came up. Like right now, basically, it's in the cards. These cards are telling because there are astrological and elemental components and historical, cultural things. These 4 cards are a testament, everybody, like, look, I'm just going to say, Tarot of Ra, Rex has this amazing deck, and I know that there is an artist, and this is a collaborative effort, and you have a big history. Inner Child cards that I did with Isha Lerner came out like 30 plus years ago, have been translated into all kinds of languages. I do recommend go out and get Inner Child cards. In my astrology cosmic calendar, you can subscribe. You can do that for free 1 day at a time or subscribe. We've got a bunch of reports you can get called astrology reports. There's 20 different kinds. We just put out one called Past Lives, another one on midpoints. These are things that you can get if you don't want to order a full reading with me or somebody else. You can get one of these computerized reports based on your month, day, and year, your exact time, if you know it, your place of birth, and you get it's sent to you by email attachments within 2 to 3 days, and you order a report, and you can start learning about your life destiny through astrology. Or we also have a numerology report. Folks, the top card is very sneering. It's the Queen of Swords. There's a little bit of a reflection there. The other ones, this is from Rex, your deck. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the first card that I chose, I shuffled the deck, and this just literally happened about 39 minutes ago. So this is January 10th. And we've done this before. I think we did it almost every time, did we not, when we were on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it goes from left to right. And what I was doing, in the past, I would do 3 cards. I like to do 3 cards from whatever deck. Sometimes I'll just do 1. It's not that I can't do longer readings, but that is a lot more information. And the way I look at tarot, having studied this for really beyond 40 years, and it was something that I've done, and I feel my heart is so close to these archetypes from the 78 cards. As we all know, there are 22 major arcana, and there's 56 minor, and this is how we eventually get playing cards, the 52 playing cards. It's a fascinating history with the Joker, and it really goes back to the fact of, I'm sure you've shared this with your audience before, but personally, there's a belief you can't prove it, but that when candidates for initiation may have been going in ancient Egypt, it's said that Jesus, whether that's true or not, during his last lost years from when he was bar mitzvah, basically from around age 13, before his ministry, from 30 to 33, he was somewhere, but there are no real records. And you can see these different books. He went to India, went to England, part of all this different lore about the Holy Grail and things like that are in somewhere in every tarot deck. There's a Holy Grail, whether it's a cup or some kind of other mysterious talisman. But at any rate, go from left to right. So
that's a great point, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and the symbology here, let me put it this way. This should explain, folks, the essence of my sun sign being in Pisces and other things in my chart, and I so appreciate, Rex, that we do this, because I defer to others. Basically, I'm doing astrology, tarot, and numerology, and publishing and other things I've done. My essence is I'm here. I believe that we live more than once. We've lived before, we'll live again. That's at least my belief system. But that at this time period, because of all these changes, like whether we say Piscean age for 2,000 years becoming Aquarian age, these are all topics. We can't do them all, one sitting here, but we have touched on this before. But the first card, and I'll just mention the cards, is the King of Pentacles on the left, and you'll see that pentacle with this amazing figure. And then the second card is a major arcana, which is the 14th card, which I am very close to for various reasons, often connected to the sign Sagittarius, which is called Temperance. And traditionally, this is sort of a card of alchemy, because you see this spiritual being or some kind of angelic figure pouring sort of some kind of electrical kind of vibrations from one cup to another. In traditional decks, that was kind of like lead into gold kind of thing, or some kind of chemical based on what temperance represented, which is often considered a guardian angel type figure. And I'm going to read a couple of things from your guidebook. Then the last card of the three card reading, you'll see on the right, which are these two. And this is why I believe a lot of this relates to what just has been happening in Los Angeles, because it's still happening. You know what I mean? If we remember what happened in Hawaii with that town, just, what was it, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Electrical fire, and then all the disputes. Again, you're wise to bring up, because that is very controversial. So this last card, when I turned it up, I turn up card, I turn the cards down as I'm pulling them, and then I sort of pick them one at a time and start reading that as a story. What is this saying to all of us? And the reason why I think this is so spectacular, I'm not saying this takes the place of, like I just said to everybody, today the moon is in Gemini, which is an air sign. Okay, air. This is the big thing of why Los Angeles suffered these Santa Ana winds. And it's right in the storyline of these cards, which shocked me when I turned them up. And look at the last one on the bottom is the 5 of Pentacles. And as soon as that came up, you see these two figures who are sort of in rags, and you see these pentacles and what looks like what could be maybe a church or some kind of special, because of when you think of, for instance, Notre Dame, which just reopened, and you think of the beautiful stained glass windows, and that just happened, after that fire from, what was it, 2019, and they said, we're going to rebuild this, as in 5 years, and $1 billion came from the world, you know what I mean, for that cathedral, and they just reopened. That was a month ago. And with star-studded people, former President Trump, who's about to become president again, was there. Joe Biden didn't go, but his wife went, and all these other people from other countries went to Notre Dame. And I was fortunate enough to be in Paris a long time ago and went into that church. We went into that cathedral. So when that was burning, and the people in France were just sobbing, because that was built, almost 1,000 years ago. And they did rebuild it, and they just, astoundingly. So these people in that card, the third card, are kind of destitute. Well, look what's happening in Los Angeles. It's not just movies, there's people on the road, what's been happening on these roadways. And I have watched it for many days. So it would take a gigantic total conspiracy were to, for that not to happen. The question is like, why did it happen? All these kind of things about winds and about hydrants and about power. And when you have a catastrophe like that, and then by the way, so I decided to do a fourth card, which is at the top of the deck when I was opening the other three, and that's the Queen of Swords. So is it okay if I sort of give a couple words from your guidebook?
Please.
Okay, well, okay, so here's the other thing that's interesting, because whenever I choose anything, like I don't do tarot readings for people. I mean, I could do them if somebody contact me and say, look, I know you're doing astrology sessions on your website, and I have my own astrologer, I do my own thing. But now that I saw what you did, on Rex's show, hey, can you do a reading or something? My recommendation would be get Rex's cards, get Tarot of Ra, get Inner Child cards, get a whole bunch of these different kinds of decks by different great artists. Well, here's the interesting thing. The first card, I'm shuffling this deck just, 40 plus minutes ago, and I've had the King of Pentacles on my desk for the last, from a particular deck for the last 6 weeks, for whatever reason. And it's from a deck that I really love and I've used for a long time. And because the imagery was really great, I had this out. So again, this is what I call synchronicity. When I turn up the first card as the King of Pentacles, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, it's like total synchronicity with what is going on for me. Okay. There's nobody out there who does tarot who doesn't have the same experience. You know what I mean? Cards keep coming up. You do one card out of 78 or a 3-card reading or 4-card reading, and you get these kind of things. Often, depending on how frequently you use the decks, it may be like every 3 days or every 2 weeks. That card keeps coming up. Everybody's got this experience if you work with tarot. And that's the universe, which is really what the tarot is all about. And we can't do it all right now, but I researched this so much, over the last so many decades and doing 2 decks that I understand how this works. So because I'm not that far from, greater Los Angeles, being on the West Coast, watching what's happening, and probably any of us out here, we have a cousin, we have a friend, we have somebody who is in the greater Los Angeles area, or they might be in San Diego, San Francisco, whatever it is, somebody we know in California. And whoever we know in California, may be many people, but it might be 1 or 2, whatever, they know somebody in Los Angeles, right? Now, spiritually, let me just say this, and I can't prove this, but in my esoteric studies, we all know that there are chakras. I mean, if you studied about the Indian concept, with yoga and so on, of 7 main chakras and the different centers in our aura or energy field, if you have studied that, well, for every country has chakras, believe it or not. So the studies that I have done about America is that the heart chakra for the United States is basically greater Los Angeles. And people might say, well, why isn't it Phoenix? Why isn't it, Chicago? Why isn't it Kansas City? Whatever it is. But this is the energy that supposedly is going on, at least through certain lines of esoteric thought. So when this started happening, it was kind of like, okay, we've had the whole political kind of death rebirth, this kind of thing going on between Democrats and Republicans, whatever. And that's been in a lot of the news, and these different wars and other things going on around the planet. We're looking for love and kindness and peace. And, this powerful year of 2025, after we had that total solar eclipse, for instance, which is still a big deal, actually, astrologically, from April 8th of last year, which went through Central America and Mexico and the United States, that path of totality. And that was actually conjunct this little planet called Chiron. And I've written about it and done podcasts about that. And that's still actually part of this sort of wave of energy of healing and woundedness and so on. At any rate, I'm going to read a couple words from the King of Pentacles here. You will remember this, Rex. By the way, it's the 77th number of the 78 cards in your guidebook. So I think that's interesting, 77. And that's when Jimmy Carter, who just died as the year, became president. And and we talked about this before. Star Wars came up in 77, the first Star Wars movie in late May. In the fall, we had Close Encounters. I was in Scotland. I was at the Findhorn community. By the way, we launched the 2 Voyager missions, which still exist. Voyager 1 and 2, which went out there, and Voyager 2 in particular, which took pictures of Saturn, particularly Uranus, and then Neptune. Incredible stuff. And that's also when Chiron was discovered in 1977, this little planet named after the centaur from Greek and Roman mythology, half human, half horse, was discovered in November of 1977. And a lot of things happened with this 77. It turned out recently with President Carter, bless his soul, lived to be 100, much better. I mean, one term as president, but, won the Nobel Peace Prize, was building all these houses. Incredible figure who also survived brain cancer. If that's, a true story, and I have no reason to really doubt it, because there are miracles that do happen with people with their health, depending on their belief system, their constitution, and, the anomalies from one person to another. But the fact that he just passed away is very, very interesting. And again, being the president for one term in 1977. And that's one of the biggest years for, spiritual changes and the movie industry, again, Star Wars and Close Encounters and astronomy, which opened us up to, looking at these planets close up, from particularly Voyager 2, which moved by Uranus in, I think it was 1986. In fact, when the Challenger exploded, that's exactly when Voyager 2 took pictures of Uranus, the same time. See, I studied the astronomy and astrology. And then in 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, Voyager 2 took pictures of Neptune, which was discovered in 1846, around the time of the Communist Manifesto. And Neptune is very connected to things like socialism and communism, as well as a universal love and other things. So somehow our technological, these amazing achievements of sending something like a Voyager 2 out there, and then we see close-up pictures of these planets. When on Earth something's happening. So back to this, let me share this. I'm going to have to take off my glasses. So the King of Pentacles, number 77, it says, hi, and you can then comment on this. You say, hi, I'm Enlil. Some say the god of all gods, Anunnaki, mountain house, pretty exalted, but this is in your description here. Pretty exalted, but I guess I needed that being, chief deity associated, and get this, folks, associated with wind, air, earth, and storms. Have I ever sent a flood? Well, maybe I did on one of my not so better days. If you see my card now, it's all about envisioning success. And get this, this is what you put out to the world. I mean, think about what's happening with Elon Musk as an example, and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, and what's happening relative to money since this was written. You then wrote, think billionaire. Everybody wants to be it. This is King of Pentacles. Think Steve Jobs. Think Alexander the Great. All that was acquired came from practically nothing, but don't doubt that a whole lot of earnest work was involved to get to all that abundance, prosperity, and security. You write here, wicked hard work, all of it. Just avoid pitfalls like self-indulgence, greed, or too much sensuality. So get in the golden chariot right now. And, chariots, I've had the chariot card also out with the King of Pentacles. So what are the odds that this would be in your description when I read that just, less than an hour ago? So get in that golden chariot right now and glow, but stay, you actually said, but stay woke. I know that's a strange term now, but basically stay awake, control that energy, control that beast, trust and believe. But when I was reading this, I was thinking, I would not normally associate the King of Pentacles with wind. But you see, the whole Los Angeles thing started as a wind warning.
Right.
It was and this is what made why this thing is still happening. And people scratch their heads and say, that can't be happening. They clocked the winds at 100 miles an hour the other night. Remember when this started, as you said, it was like January 7th. And by the way, as we're doing this, Moon is in Gemini conjunct Jupiter. And Jupiter is the fastest rotating planet, even though it's the biggest and almost a sun, in terms of its constitution of helium and stuff. But we have a 20 24-hour day, 23-hour and 56-minute day of rotation of the Earth. Jupiter is spinning around is like less than 10 hours for this giant celestial body. We still don't know all these different secrets, about the giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn. Any rate, so I was astounded. I'm thinking King of Pentacles. Well, if you have a tarot deck, whoever is listening, that's Earth. Okay, that is usually the Earth element. But when you wrote it, you wrote wind, air, earth, and storms. So, and then to talk about the billionaire kind of thing. So the King of Pentacles, literally last night, when I saw Mel Gibson was on the news and lost his home, he was actually joking about it. I mean, joking from the sense of like many of these celebrities who are losing their homes, they have enough money that, they'll go through the insurance thing, but they often have another home. I mean, they're fortunate enough to have another home or whatever, or they have the money to go wherever they need to go for safety, as long as they weren't in the house when it was happening, or their family. So this is an amazing first card to me. And maybe we could take a break here, but do you want to you mentioned Anunnaki there, you know what I mean? God of all gods for this card.
And let me ask also, when we look at the situation with the drones,
Oh, okay.
I'm wondering if we could link these cards to the drones, or if you'd need to do a new pull.
No. What I want people to know, and that's why I want, to focus here, there's plenty of astrology that, we do something else down the road here and we've done. And there are unbelievable astrology things. I do want to say there's a full moon. The first full moon is coming up on Monday, and that's the sun in Capricorn, moon in Cancer. So I think part of what you were just talking about, I've been aware of that drone situation, and that was such a big thing. And still, I guess, is, because the government wasn't coming out and saying, okay, here's what's going on. And when thousands of people, in New Jersey and then it became other states, are saying, well, wait a minute, you know what I mean? Is this safe? Like, who's doing it? Where they're coming from, what's going on here. And then you don't have any kind of, New Jersey's not saying anything. Everybody's saying, well, don't worry. I mean, right? Roswell, flying saucers all around the world. We know what's happened. I mean, in terms of like, nobody's saying what maybe really is going on. You know what I mean? And it's not just America, something on the inner levels. And I think we've talked about before, but I've studied the charts for Roswell astrology, and particularly Kenneth Arnold's sighting of 9 incredible objects near Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, which that's how we get the name flying saucers. And that was about 2 weeks before Roswell. There's an exact chart for that. But you go on there because, again, the King of Pentacles, like you're saying, just above this figure is like a winged heart. And it looks like almost like a flying saucer with the King of Pentacles. Rex.
Yeah. That's the symbol of the winged disc.
Yeah, from ancient Egypt. I mean, that I know of it, but the Anunnaki and so on. So, well, at any rate, I know we have only limited time, but here, the 14th card, which is the major, sometimes you do a 3-card reading or 4 cards or 10 cards, and there's no major arcana. Or sometimes they're, 2 out of 3 are majors. And it doesn't mean because you're not getting major cards that it isn't a major event. But temperance has so much to do with attempting to keep balance. I won't read all of it here, but from your description, I see this card, and in the decks I created, as the guardian angel card. Okay, because the 13th card is death, and in the majors, and the 15th is the devil. Okay, so let's just be honest. And in between is 14. Okay, which does relate traditionally, because every major trump or major arcana is connected generally, each of the major planets and the sign that we have 12 signs of the zodiac, unless you get into the area where there's a 13th sign, but basically 12 signs of the zodiac. And we have 10 major planetary energies, or sun, moon, and from Mercury through Pluto. And the way the major cards, if you get into astrology, every card has its either zodiacal or solar, lunar, or planetary archetype. So this is connected to Sagittarius. But you wrote, and I'm not familiar with this. You wrote, "Hi, I'm Nama. I hung out in Mesopotamia's pantheon of Eridu." Do I have those words correct?
Yeah, Nama and Eridu.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
right. And then you basically wrote, "I don't know about all of this, but in Sumerian cosmogony, my ocean self is responsible for the creation of the heavens and the earth." And basically it says, if you see my card now, and again, everybody, this is not my reading. I did this because, you invited me to be on the show, and I always love to do this because I know whatever's going to happen, I'm not pulling the cards. I'm just a vehicle. This is part of my out of the body experience from when I was 22, which was like learning that I have a guardian angel, or I am the expression in the personality world of what I consider to be my soul energy. Or I don't even like using those terms because we all say, well, I believe that I have a soul. We'll often use these terminologies, or soulmates. I'm with my soulmate. I have a strong belief system that everyone that we love, let me put it this way, everyone that we love, that we care about, we have a soulmate connection that we've known before in some capacity. So this helps me to understand, why do you have children, or why do you have, whatever partners and friends and associates are employed by, a certain company, certain themes, things like that. At any rate, here's this keynote. It says, if you see my card now for temperance, first of all, the word you use with temperance is patience. And I mean, talk about all of us needing patience, whether we know somebody or somebody's in greater Los Angeles. And while that was happening, we've had all these severe storms. I mean, a lot of the ice storms and the snowstorms and the weather conditions of the last year, I can't prove this right now, but I've been watching it, all stem from the total solar eclipse in Aries, the main first fire sign, from April 8 of last year, because that path of totality, which is a narrow path if you have a total solar eclipse, and they don't happen all that often. It's not like having a partial lunar eclipse or even a total lunar eclipse. Eclipses of the moon happen with regularity. Total solar eclipses don't necessarily happen every year. And also certain places do not necessarily have that path of totality. But the one that happened less than a year ago was exactly conjunct Chiron. So you can read all the archetypes of Chiron having to do with shamans and mentors and healing, but also woundedness and things like the Twilight Zone, even the show with Rod Serling and his life. He lived a Chiron life of 50 years. Chiron has a 50-year cycle. So we still have this Chiron energy creating these storms. When I say creating, or in synchronicity, and that's because Chiron retrograded back. It's still there. That's why this storm is lingering. And a lot of these severe storms throughout the country are more severe than normal. Right before the Los Angeles event was happening, or almost like the day before, they were showing pictures in Cincinnati, Rex, of ice on highways and these big trucks that were slipping all around. People were in accidents. And it wasn't just Cincinnati. That was just an example. Ice and snow. There was like a feet of snow somewhere in Kansas, Kansas City or wherever it was. And then suddenly the Los Angeles event happened with winds and fire and so on. So it's all these elements. So it says here, if you see my card now for temperance, you've attained the perfect middle path for your journey through sheer patience and finding meaning in your environs along the way. But as a Sagittarius, I'm personally just sometimes drawn to get off the beaten path and go a little extreme, be a little excessive, and lose my perfect balance. And then it says, I constantly strive for a more enlightened state of being. Jupiter rules me, and my number is 14. So I'm creative, expansive, and need balance, prudence, and temperance to balance the big creative energy fireballing in me. Well, why?
Did you say something's going on with Jupiter today?
Yeah, I just said that it's happening now. It's literally happening right now. I mean, this is the exact hit. When we decided on this day, and Rex can confirm this, we were going to maybe do this a little early, a week ago. The goal was around New Year. This is perfect because these cards would not have come up if we had done this at New Year's. With the full moon happening, the moon is in the air sign. I mean, all the dispute here, they can say anything they want. I mean, fire is what's happened here, but it's the wind that caused this stuff going on. And when you hear these stories about the snow and the ice and the frigid temperatures, the polar vortex, what do we hear now? And this was not a term, when I was growing up, you never really heard the specifics of the so-called weather report of like, if it's minus 40 wind chill factor. Nobody ever talked about a wind chill factor, right? I mean, when you got the weather, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was like, it's really cold out there, folks. It's below freezing. You know what I mean? Put stuff, put chains on your tires if you're traveling here. And now we have these different terms, right? So in order to make people aware so that you really bundle up or know what's going on, it's not like, okay, it's 2 degrees, it's 10 degrees, it's, below freezing. We get this additional thing. What the wind chill factor makes it feel like it's minus whatever. And I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, 40 plus years ago. And there was one morning when I happened to open up a restaurant. I was there as a host on a Sunday morning, and it was like minus 30 or 40 wind chill. And it took me over 45 minutes to scrape everything off the windshield and barely get to open the restaurant, and be there at Sunday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, I've experienced some of those storms, and that's what was happening. And I think some of that is still happening around some of the places, in the United States right now. You know what I mean? The snow and the ice, while Los Angeles has its thing.
Oh yeah, big time, man. Oklahoma, Texas is getting there's there's a bunch of ice storms going on. Now, also I've noticed when I'm looking at this card, and then I'd like to, if we can after this, if you have time, I'd really like to hear about some of your 2025 predictions, because you said you see some big stuff here in 2025. But that card I see having water. California needs some of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's that dispute going on. We don't have to get into it politically between the governor and the president, former president about to, take office again, about water, and a lot of this, there's so many accusations that can happen. But the point is, there was a problem with these with these hydrants. But when you have 100-mile-an-hour winds and they were clocked at that's tornado winds. You have a chart because you take a first breath, which again is your air. You start having your own life, and you have Jupiter and Saturn and the sun, moon, different planets at different areas and different signs with different relationships. And so Saturn, which is often connected to the skeletal system in medical astrology, and if you fall, if you break a leg, if you get a wound, astrologers who are into medical astrology, and I'm one of them, will say, okay, well, where was Saturn? Was something afflicting your Saturn, or did Saturn do anything? But it isn't the planet Saturn that's doing anything. It's the archetype or themes of what that planetary affiliate is all about. So that's the way it works. It works through synchronicity. And that's the thing. Synchronicity is not like the way we understand time. Okay, like for instance, you and I, as an example, we had to figure out, based on your schedule, my schedule, when we're going to do it. Why are we doing it today? Why is the full moon 3 days from now, which is the first full moon and enlightening time every month? We have 13 full moons in a calendar year. And the moon is not doing anything. It's the sun that is making the moon appear full, because the sun and the moon and the earth in between. And if we have an eclipse, partial, whatever it is, then there's a blockage of some of that sunlight. It's all the sun's light that we're talking about. The moon is just reflecting it, okay? Not that the moon is unimportant, but it's like Shakespearean plays, what are you playing? What role do you have, in this giant scheme of things? Now, back to the other thing, tomorrow, which is my mom's birthday, and then when I found Eleanor Bach as a teacher, that was her birthday. The same day, 3 years apart, I go from my own mother, who's a sun sign Capricorn, to my main female teacher, who's born the same day. That isn't synchronicity. I mean, that just happened back when I started. And the main male astrologer, who was Dane Rudhyar, was sun sign Aries. My dad was sun sign Aries. Why would it be that I get into astrology when I was going to be possibly a doctor or something else, and I get into this field that I didn't want to get into, and I didn't have any money? You don't go to a school, 40, 50 years ago and start getting a major in astrology. It didn't exist. There are some schools that actually are beginning to do this, I believe, some kind of astronomical major or something. But it's not as if so many people are going to do that, and then scientists are going to say, "Great, welcome to the group." There's still this fight going on between religion, science, astrology, tarot, numerology. So what happens tomorrow is not the moon; it's the moon's orbit. Okay, so traditionally, and you're going to remember these terms, and you've probably had people on in Vedic or Indian-oriented astrology, more based on what we call the constellations of the actual star groups. Western astrology, this is a whole other thing, is called tropical. Our system in Europe and the United States, if you're an American astrologer, European astrologer, we're using more of a mathematical system that starts at the spring equinox, March 20th, March 21, every year, the sun is said to go into Aries. That's a sign. It's a 30-day time period. And unfortunately, has the same name as the constellation of Aries the Rare. And supposedly 2,000 years ago, which was the time of the beginning of what we call the Piscean Age, the constellations and what we then developed through Rome and Greece and Rome the last 2,000 years was a Western mathematical astrology that starts at the spring equinox, which is now called International Astrology Day. I think it's March 20th. Sometimes the sun goes into Aries on the 20th, sometimes 21st of March. And that starts 12 equal time periods that are mathematical. The astrology of the West is a math system, which is why I love it. And why, if you put a lot of energy into all your teachers and guides, it's fantastic. Okay, I'm not knocking Vedic astrology and so on. But the astrology that began in India that a lot of people start using is a constellational astrology. It relates back to the zodiac, Sagittarius, the archer, and the stars of Sagittarius, Leo, the lion, and that is not what, if you're a Leo in Western astrology, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about Leo, the lion, and the stars of Leo. It depends on what part of the 30-day time period. So there's a difference between the constellations and what we call the zodiacal signs, and unfortunately, they have the same names. What's happening tomorrow is that over about 18 years and 7 months, the orbit of the moon, so like we tend to think, oh, the moon is orbiting us. That's not exactly true. Okay, the Earth and the moon are sort of in this making this dance where we're sort of orbiting each other. But because the moon is so much smaller, we're the primary part of it. It's like if you go to Pluto, there's a major moon. There's 5 moons that we now know with Pluto. And the major one is called Charon, which is named after the ferryman taking the souls of the dead, okay, to the underworld. I mean, so we discovered this moon. Pluto was discovered in 1930, and I think it was 1978. The telescopes say, wait a minute, Pluto has a moon. Well, now we know they have 5. There are 5 moons. But Pluto and Charon are kind of like us and the moon. They're almost like a dual system. And this is part of the reason why our moon is so significant in astrology and your moon sign and alignments, because we're really like a double, sort of planetary vibration. Based on what we're doing in our little dance, then our orbital thing of Earth and Moon goes around the sun. So that's what we call 365 and a quarter days, okay? Now, the moon has an orbit that is called the lunar nodes, and it used to be called Dragon's Head and Dragon's Tail, which comes out of Chinese mythology, that the moon's northern position this is kind of a little bit elaborate, but this has gone on for thousands of years. There's the moon and its position and basically going through the signs of the zodiac every 2 to 2.5 days. And then there's its orbital connection, which is called the Dragon's Head in a northern direction or the Dragon's Tail in a southern direction. In Vedic astrology, they use Rahu and Ketu. So those are the names, which is more based on Indian mythology. So you might go online and say, oh, the nodes of the moon, they'll show these horseshoe-looking figures. And one is said to be more futuristic, which is more usually the northern node, and the southern is more past, like future and past. I don't accept that necessarily. I think that's also overly hyped. You'll see a lot of people will say, oh, the north node is good. The north node is positive. The north node is future. The south node is negative. But you see, this gets into a whole other thing we should talk about sometime, which is why do we have a term like it's all going south to mean negative? You mean like, what if you're in the southern hemisphere? Do they have a term? It's all going north? No, it's because of the way we look at the earth. We have so much of a, and this is one of the faults in things like astrology. We talk about, well, we just had the winter solstice. Really? What did they have in the southern hemisphere? They just had their summer solstice. But astrology began, at least the astrology we have, in the northern hemisphere. So when you look at books, go back to, if you have kids, whatever it is, look at one of their books on geography. Do you ever see a picture where Antarctica is on the top and the North Pole is on the bottom? No. Why? The earth is revolving. We have a certain thing that creates a certain way of looking at the world, and it's in our terminology, right? So who has ever heard of, like, it all went north? Never. That has never happened. But in Brazil, I'm sure they're thinking about that. Argentina, right? Indonesia, Australia, those darn northerners, who do they think they are, really? So there, even my Dane Rudhyar in astrology, my main male astrologer, brought this up. And this is pretty controversial, I'll say, but he wrote about it. He said, there might need to be at some point a reversal of signs. I mean, when we're looking for Santa Claus coming from the North Pole with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, people in the Southern Hemisphere are going out to the beach. How do they deal with this kind of thing? So what's happening is the orbits of the Dragon's Head and Tail have been in Aries and Libra for the last 18 and a half years. And the orbit of the moon basically is a retrograding factor. Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde. So the moon is going forward all the time. That's based on the Earth-Moon system. So the moon is not going backwards, but the lunar orbit is retreating and going retrograde through the 12 signs. And each sign and its opposite, north and south, it's about a 1.5 year cycle, about 18 months. So we've had Aries North Node and Libra South Node, and now it's shifting into Pisces and Virgo tomorrow. But the PS here is there are two kinds of nodes. One is a true node and one is a approximate or mean node. And for thousands of years, astrologers used the approximate, or what's called the mean node, the average position of the lunar orbits. The lunar orbit in astrology, if you have a chart out there, if you've seen your chart, somebody's talked to you, if you studied it, the north and south nodes, they're two horseshoe figures. They're considered fate destiny factors. So the long-winded answer, so you got your answer about January 25. Yeah, significant, but I think overhyped. I think from an astronomical viewpoint, if you have a telescope, you're going to see some planets out there, January 25, January 24, January 26. There are a bunch of planets all in the same sort of area, but you're not going to look at it during the day. You have to have a clear night, and then look, and at a certain point. And so people will get some instructions, and I'm sure there will be astronomers who are already talking about this. Often astrologers pick up what's happening from the astronomers. Okay, like my favorite magazine, I'm not subscribed right now, is Astronomy. So they would have been talking about this for a while, months ago, or in the current issue. They'd say, look up in the sky, take your telescope, take your binoculars, you're going to find Jupiter, Saturn, whatever it is. But the thing is, that's because, for instance, Saturn and Neptune are both in Pisces, okay? So they're in the same area of the sky, okay? Pluto has gone into Aquarius, okay? So that's Aquarius and Pisces are next door neighbors, Most people, you're not going to see Pluto unless you have some advanced telescope to look at where that is. But Saturn is a visible planet, and if you have an advanced telescope, there would be Neptune, depending on where the moon is. We're also getting, because of the time of the year, Venus is moving into Pisces and into Aries, which is not far from this other cluster of planets. And Mercury is also in that area, but Mercury is hard to see, okay? So there's a string of planetary energies, but it's not like what happened February 4th of 1962, a total solar eclipse in Aquarius, 5 other planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So I don't want to unhype it completely. I think people should go and realize, but it's not as if this is going to dramatically affect your birth chart. Okay. But, it's a wonder. It's amazing. Hopefully you have clear skies. You'll see, Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn are visible planets. Venus is visible. Okay. Just last week, like recently, right after a new moon, when the sun and moon together, like 2 days later, or 3 days later, in the western sky, you'll see this beautiful crescent moon. And last week, I was taking pictures of the moon, and then you see this bright little, what looks like a star, and that was Venus. So this is where, going back to your, the whole thing about the drones. Well, it must have been Venus. I mean, remember the thing about UFOs and so on? Oh no, that was Venus. Like it was this bright object, and when the person thought it was moving, you know what I mean? So how many times did the Air Force try and weather balloon, planet Venus, anomaly?
Yes.
What's that?
And swamp gas.
Swamp gas. I mean, the thing is, like after a while, I mean, the whole thing. I mean, it's still like George Carlin with its stuff. It's just space stuff, basically. Let's throw everything we can do out there. But whatever it wasn't a UFO. It wasn't a flying saucer. Wasn't little green men from Mars.
It was probably little green men from the military pretending to be from Mars.
The thing is that this is a serious issue about drones. We've had 2 Jupiter-Saturn squares last year. They are at right angles. And that's they just did this again the day before Christmas. They did it in the summer of last year, and that'll happen in June of this year, 2025. Jupiter and Saturn, the 2 largest planets, are in a right angle to each other. And a right angle is basically tension and friction, but it can be positive. It's like, what is the big work that each one of us has to do? I think that's what this reading is here. And with the full moon on Monday, and the awareness that Chiron is sort of reactivating a total eclipse. And so the weather patterns are part of it. And also, but remember that first card, the King of Pentacles, you had written in there, hey, Bill Gates, Alexander the Great, King of Pentacles. And now we have the presence of like an Elon Musk and other billionaires. We've never had really billionaires, very much. I mean, there was J.P. Morgan, 100 years ago, and sort of in American certain places, people wound up having enormous money. And we've had the Andrew Carnegies of people who give incredible amounts of money. Even Bill Gates, where there's a lot of, working with Windows computers in my own life, this has not been an easy thing. But, a lot of these people, whether there's a lot of talk about what they do with their money, nevertheless, there is a lot of charity that goes on. There's a lot of, we don't know all the details about what happens, the super rich. I mean, it's always been like that, whether they're an Alexander the Great, a warlord, Genghis Khan, whoever it may be, people have power. Look what just happened in Syria, as an example, and then suddenly you have a revolution. I was thinking of what happened in Romania with their leader, Nicolae Ceausescu. That was in 1981 when the Soviet Union, and the Berlin Wall, fell. We've had all these revolutions, and then things change, and you just never know, particularly with countries where we don't have what you're doing, the freedom to be on YouTube, to be able to voice ideas and, go over things that are controversial, which I think is what you're doing is like fantastic.
Well, I appreciate that. I think what you're doing is fantastic.
And there will be some other astrological things. And when the inauguration happens, the sun is with Pluto, which only happens once a year. And really that's never happened at an inauguration since James Madison in 1809. And that's when Pluto was in Pisces. So normally we don't have the beginning of a presidency and a vice presidency when there's a major planetary solar conjunction with the planet. So there is this Aquarian energy and the solar life force and the god of the underworld, which is the planet of mysteries and secrets. So I think, yes, around the inauguration and this alignment, it's going to be a really powerful late January. And by the way, Uranus, that planet, is going to make a station, appear to shift from reverse to direct in the sign Taurus. That's another big thing. So January is almost like, when we think of the whole year, what's happening right now in these events, this card reading is kind of like the foretelling of a very profound, soul energizing year. There's other things we could talk about from a spiritual, what we might call the hierarchy, or disciples and masters and teachers and goddesses and gods coming together every quarter, every century, like 1625, 1725, and so on. So 2025, if you're online, you're going to start seeing things about sort of a conclave, a sort of meeting of angelic spiritual forces. Whether you accept that or not is up to how you do your meditations and your spiritual work. But there is something, that I'm well aware of, and I think people pick up on it in their dreams and visions. And sometimes we get these winds and storms and other things, and they're kind of like, the Bob Dylan energy, and Peter Paul, Mary, which way the wind is blowing. I was just using the quote, you don't need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows, from before you were, but from Bob Dylan, there's just a movie with Timothy Chalamet now where he's playing Bob Dylan. So we're going to get a lot of Bob Dylan, lyrics and energies. And that's one of the things where, what's blowing in the wind. Look what just happened in Los Angeles and in the storm areas in with ice and snow. It's wind chill factors. That's what this reading is all about. That's what, today is all about. Thank you again.